Companionship can chase away the blues. I awoke early and was catapulted into alertness by the saying, "The early bird catches the worm," which describes the notion that those human beings who are eager and early are the ones who most succeed. The honor of delivering that judgment shall be yours at the end of my story. With all due respect to the American robin, there is a prolific consumer of that birdland delicacy. I felt rather lucky early on Saturday morning when ideas on today's assigned topic, companionship, were handed to me in bed on a platter by the television programming of CBS under the banner, "Birds of a feather flock together." What could be a better harbinger of success? Immediately my memory travelled back in time to the magical spot in Boardwalk where 6 rivers met and mingled. I pictured myself perched on the new bridge and looking across as hundreds of white cattle egrets alighted on their selected roosts, positioned like white pepper-shaped bulbs on the dark green of the old banyan tree. The sun, too briefly casting its crepuscular rays over the fleeting serene spectacle, brought to mind the favourite Jamaican socializing song of all time. Moonlight tonight, moonshine tonight, come make we dance and sing. Moonshine tonight, come make we dance and sing. Make we rock so, you de rock so, on the banyan tree. Me de rock so, you de rock so, how happy is we. Companionship usually means hanging out with and doing things with other persons, neighbors, friends, siblings and cousins, strangers, even at the barbecue dance hall. I appreciated in that moment that companionship is so very human, normal and very necessary. It gives us emotional balance and permits us to enjoy life. Some even say that it's in our DNA, so to deny that like a congregation of egrets we need others is not facing reality. I thought of the state we were in and whispered, "Loneliness is no fun. It's like a hunter without his gun." Alas, my second aha moment of enlightenment in the aging morn, to quote the forbidden bard, "with joy instead of gloom. A most joyful peace this morning with it brings. Some shall be pardoned and some punished." From Romeo and Juliet. Innovated by the smell of brewing Blue Mountain coffee, I sank, accompanied by my cup, into a swivel armchair to view Early Morning Joe on Saturday, August 12th, 2023. They were, to my surprised delight, discussing Hillary Clinton's essay on the weaponization of loneliness. She was expressing her concern about the vast right-wing conspiracy characterized by dark money, extremist propaganda, misinformation, and election skullduggery, which threatened our democracy. Her alarm was exacerbated by the grave warning from America's top doctor that given the epidemic of loneliness and isolation over the last 2 decades, Americans' overall health, including the health of our democracy, makes our countrymen more vulnerable to anticipated alien and domestic attacks during the 2024 presidential election season. For example, a hallmark of American democracy is that elections have largely been run by local, usually non-partisan volunteers and officials. Not anymore. As the trust and social ties that bind communities together have frayed, apathy, isolation, and polarization have undercut the old, quote, "we are all in this together" ethos. A fraying of the social fabric can also be seen more broadly in society. Polls conducted in 1972 showed roughly 45% of Americans felt they could reliably trust other Americans. However, that proportion shrank to roughly 30% in 2016. Meanwhile, levels of polarization are at near historic highs. We now have MAGA election deniers and QAnon enthusiasts. This has led to a shortage of poll workers because many of them have faced harassment and abuse. According to the scientific analyses, quote, across many measures, Americans appear to be becoming less socially connected over time. This is not a new problem. It's hard to get precise estimates of the rates of social connection, but we can identify trends. Social connection can encompass the interactions, relationships, roles, and sense of connection of individuals, communities, or society. Not surprisingly, social connection is sparked dramatically by the dangers of a vacuum when companionship declines. Immeasurable harm has been suffered by contemporary society with the advocates of conservative extremism maliciously propel divisive messages that are likely to undermine and rotten the roots of democracy. These conservatives have, by taking advantage of the vacuum, spread a weird gospel of hate and distrust of constituted authority. Companionship, shared leisure for the sake of enjoyment and intrinsic satisfaction, has on average decreased by 14 hours per month between 2003 and 2020. And decline in hours spent engaging with friends is starkest for young people aged 15 to 24. The COVID-19 pandemic accelerated trends in declining social participation. Reshaping the responsibilities of brotherly love is a consuming anger that replaces love of all with hate of the other. The accepted mantra is to make this world a better place if you can. But it should be borne in mind that 7% of people who want a third party took away Hillary's voters in 2016. But there was yet more to be learned in that compact Supreme Ethics 101 class on MSNBC. An interview with Tyler Merritt, author of I Take My Coffee Black, followed. They discussed how, although he did everything as a 6'2" black man with dreadlocks and a bandana, he continued to scare Southern white women. In fact, he tried so hard not to cause alarm. He brings in his book laughter, grace, and brotherly love into any community that is able to be a part of. The good neighbor, brotherly love paradigm doesn't change attitudes, especially in those situations of extreme and unfounded fear of the other. Floyd's public lynching by the police is an ultra-dramatic reflection of the consequence of fear and detestation of the other. But we have on the side of brotherly love Christian ethics, which entails a disposition to sacrifice the interests of the self for the good of the neighbor. We all know the parable of the Good Samaritan. A man was beaten by robbers, a priest and a Levite, hence the Jewish manual Leviticus with rules for social behaviors, both crossed the road to the other side of the road. But the Samaritan had pity, bandaged the wounds, and paid some money to an innkeeper to nurse the man back to health. Good neighborliness is another aspect of companionship. It was the same milk of human kindness that one imagines ran in the blood of President Ford when he pardoned Nixon. He had pleaded in his inauguration, quote, "Let brotherly love purge our hearts of suspicion and hate." These lines were part of the preliminary before the pardon declaration. And he was in the tradition of the rules set out in Leviticus 19. Quote, "The Lord said to Moses, speak to the entire assembly of Israel and say to them, respect your mother and your father. Observe the Sabbath. Do not turn to idols or metal gods. When you harvest, leave the fallen grapes for the poor and the foreigner. Do not steal, lie, deceive one another, swear falsely or defraud your neighbor. Don't hold back a hired worker's wages overnight. Do not hate a fellow Israelite in your heart. Do not seek revenge, but love your neighbor as yourself and keep my decrees." The central theme spirit of goodwill permeates all sectors of society and leads to greater social interaction and less loneliness, which is good for the health of America. Not unlike the 1967 movie about the young black teacher played by Sidney Poitier, who brought good neighbor values and unity to an unruly East End community in London, every mission has to come to an end one day. Everyone benefited from the experience of companionship and goodwill, including the teacher himself, and so people were very sad when it was time for him to go. Similarly, I suspect, with those who are moved by the foregoing paragraphs. I chose these words from the song of the movie. And so the time has come for closing books and long-lasting looks must end. And as I leave, I know that I am leaving my best friend, a friend who taught me right from wrong and weak from strong. And that's a lot to learn. What can I give you in return? If you wanted the moon, I would try to make a start. But I would rather you let me give you my heart. To Sir, with love.